All right, so today we're going to take a deep dive into something pretty critical in the Marine Corps world.
Yeah, MCDP 1-3.
MCDP 1-3, that's right.
Cool.
Marine Corps Doctrinal Publication 1-3. And we're focusing specifically on Chapter 6, cooperating.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a big one, right?
it is.
Especially when we're talking about, the battlefield and how things rarely go according to plan.
Right, and the document actually recognizes that right up front.
Oh, does it really?
Yeah, it pretty much says, look, given the nature of war, it is a delusion to think that we can be in control with any sort of certitude or precision.
Okay, wow. That's pretty blunt.
Yeah, it's acknowledging the reality that Marines face.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So how does the Marine Corps then bridge that gap
Yeah.
between, the need for control, but the reality of constant uncertainty?
That's where cooperation comes in.
Okay.
It's really the Marine Corps solution to this challenge.
Uh-huh.
It's a key principle that allows Marines to navigate the unpredictable nature of combat.
So how's it defined? What's the MCDP 1-3 definition of cooperation?
Well, they define it as the union of self-discipline and initiative in pursuit of a common goal.
Okay, so it's not just following orders.
No, it's about striking a balance between discipline and knowing when to adapt and take charge.
Right. So it's having that discipline, but then also knowing when the situation calls for you to maybe deviate a little.
Exactly. It's about being able to make judgments on the fly when the situation demands it.
Okay, I got it. So it's kind of like, blending those two together. But how does this play out like in a real world scenario?
Okay, so picture this Operation Desert Storm.
Okay.
Smoke from burning oil wells has turned the sky pitch black. You can barely see anything.
Wow.
Now, a Huey pilot, equipped with a night vision, finds himself guiding flights of Cobras through this near-zero visibility to attack Iraqi armor.
So they're flying blind, essentially.
Pretty much. They couldn't see a thing, but they had a mission to accomplish.
Okay, so how do they pull that off?
Cooperation born out of necessity. The Huey pilot, flying blind, is calling out targets to the Cobras, who are relying solely on his guidance to engage the enemy.
That sounds intense.
It was a high-stakes situation, for sure.
Yeah, so how'd it go?
They were incredibly effective. They decimated targets they couldn't have otherwise engaged. It proves that even in the most challenging conditions, cooperation is key to success.
So even when you can't see what's going on and you're relying on somebody else to tell you what to do, you can still be incredibly effective.
Right, and this isn't just a historical anecdote. This directly applies to the challenges Marines might face on the battlefield today.
Yeah, communication is key. You got to be able to talk to each other and trust the information that you're being given.
Trust is a huge part of it.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've seen cooperation on like a grand scale, right?
Right.
But how does it function at a more individual level?
Well, MCDP 1-3 breaks down the concept of control into two types, centralized and decentralized.
Okay, so what's the difference?
Okay, imagine centralized control as like a traditional pyramid. Orders flow from the top down through the ranks.
It's a very traditional military structure.
Exactly. It's efficient for routine tasks, but in a dynamic environment like combat, it can be too slow and inflexible.
Right. Yeah, because things are changing so quickly, you don't have time to go all the way up the chain of command to get permission to do something.
Exactly, and that's where decentralized control comes in.
So how's that different?
It flips the model. It's about empowering individuals and smaller units to make decisions on the ground.
So they're given the freedom to assess and make a decision without having to wait for orders.
Right, it's all about adaptability,
Mm.
being able to make the best decision given the immediate circumstances.
So it's almost like, in football, when a quarterback sees what the defense is doing and he changes the play at the last minute.
Exactly, it's like calling an audible.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Mm.
But for this to work, you need a heavy dose of something, right? What is it?
Discipline.
Discipline. Okay. And I think MCDP 1-3 is pretty clear on its stance about that. There is only one kind of discipline. Perfect discipline.
Yeah, it doesn't mince words.
But what does that really mean for a Marine in the field?
Well, it's more nuanced than just blind obedience. The manual talks about two types of discipline: imposed and self-discipline.
All right, break this down for me.
Okay, so imposed discipline is the external kind, following orders, because you have to.
Right. You're told to do something, you do it.
Exactly. It's essential for structure and order, but it can also be limiting.
How so?
If it's the only type of discipline you have, it can stifle initiative, make it hard to adapt to changing situations.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So what's the other kind?
Self-discipline.
Okay.
This one comes from within.
All right, so it's not just doing what you're told, but understanding why.
Exactly. It's driven by a sense of duty, responsibility, and camaraderie.
Those core values that kind of define what it means to be a Marine.
Precisely. And in the heat of battle, when everything is going crazy, that self-discipline allows you to act decisively to support your fellow Marines, even under incredible pressure.
So it's almost like that internal compass guiding your actions, even when the plan falls apart.
That's a great way to put it. And MCDP 1 to 3 even draws a parallel between self-discipline in successful sports teams and Marine units.
Really?
Yeah, think about a championship basketball team. They're not just following the coach's playbook. They're anticipating each other's moves, covering for each other, working together seamlessly.
Because they have that internal drive to win as a team.
Exactly.
And that same principle applies to Marines, right? That drive to succeed as a unit is what makes effective cooperation possible.
Right. It all ties together.
Okay, so we've established that self-discipline is essential, but how does a Marine develop this kind of internal drive?
Well, that's where we start to see the interconnectedness of these ideas in MCDP 1.3. And it's something we'll explore in more detail in the next part of our deep dive.
All right, that sounds good. I'm looking forward to it.
It's interesting how MCDP 1.3 talks about developing this self-discipline. It doesn't give you like a step-by-step guide or anything. Instead, it focuses on developing a certain mindset.
Okay.
A mindset of responsibility.
Okay, so instead of just, rote memorization, it's about understanding the deeper why behind the rules.
Exactly. And remember that quote, there is only one kind of discipline, perfect discipline.
Yeah.
That's not just a catchy phrase. It's a core value that should be reflected in everything a Marine does.
So it's about holding yourself to the highest standard even when no one's watching.
Right, because you understand that your actions have consequences.
And not just for you.
Right, for the entire unit.
Okay, so every decision you make, every action you take has that ripple effect.
Exactly.
Now, does this sense of responsibility, does it go beyond the battlefield as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
MCDP 1 to 3 highlights that Marines carry this mindset into their personal lives too.
Okay, so we're not just talking about combat situations. This is
Yeah.
something that you take with you everywhere you go.
Right, think about it. You see it all the time. Marines volunteering in their communities, being good neighbors.
There's that inherent sense of duty.
It's inspiring, really.
Yeah, it is. So
Oh.
it's like that willingness to go above and beyond to do what's right, not because they're ordered to, but because it's just part of who they are.
Exactly. And that brings us to the role of leadership.
Okay.
Because MCDP 1 to 3 is very clear. Leaders need to set the example.
Right. It's actions speak louder than words. Marines aren't going to follow leaders who just talk the talk.
They need to see those principles in action.
Okay, so lead by example, show what it means to be a disciplined and cooperative member of the team.
Right. And you, as a Marine, you have the opportunity to be that kind of leader.
That's a good point. So what kind of leader do you want to be?
How can you embody these principles?
Right. How can you inspire those around you?
Think back to that example from Operation Desert Storm.
Okay.
The Huey pilot didn't have to guide those Cobras.
Right. He could have stayed back
But he understood the mission depended on him taking initiative,
on cooperating with his fellow Marines.
even when facing extreme risk.
Yeah. And that's what sets Marines apart, right?
That willingness to put the mission and their fellow Marines first.
That selflessness.
Yeah.
That commitment to something larger than themselves.
It's what makes the Marine Corps such an effective fighting force.
Powerful stuff.
So remember, cooperation, it's not just a tactic, it's a mindset.
Okay.
It's about understanding you're part of something bigger than yourself.
And your actions have a direct impact on those around you.
Right. MCDP 1 to 3, it's all about creating that culture of cooperation and discipline.
So Marines can overcome any challenge.
Exactly.
So as you go back to your unit, to your training, take these principles with you. Think about how you can apply them in your own actions.
Because at the end of the day, it's not just about understanding the doctrine, it's about living it.
It's about making cooperation and discipline a part of who you are as a Marine.
Right.
It's interesting how MCDP 1 to 3, it manages to balance this need for control with the need for adaptability.
Yeah, it is a tricky balance.
Right.
And this is where that concept of off-drugs tactic comes into play.
Off-drugs tactic.
Yeah, you might know it better as mission-type orders.
Okay, mission-type orders. So
Yeah.
how does that fit into everything we've been talking about?
Well, instead of giving rigid step-by-step instructions, commanders, they outline the overall intent,
Okay.
the desired end state.
Yeah.
And this empowers those subordinate leaders to make decisions on the ground.
So trusting Marines to use their judgment, their training, to adapt to whatever's happening.
Exactly. It goes hand in hand with that decentralized control and cooperation.
Right.
When every Marine understands the why behind the mission, They can act with more initiative.
knowing that their actions are contributing to the bigger picture.
Right.
So it's almost like each Marine becomes a chess player instead of just a pawn moving along a predetermined path.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
They're all working towards the same objective, but they have the freedom to adjust as they go.
And that's what makes the Marine Corps so effective. It's not just about firepower or blindly following orders. It's about using the intelligence and initiative of every Marine.
Now, we've talked about cooperation within a unit, but MCDP 1.3 also emphasizes cooperation beyond that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So like working with other units,
Right.
coordinating with air support.
Even collaborating with joint forces from other branches.
It's all about working together.
Exactly.
It reminds me of a story I read about Marines during the Battle of Iwo Jima.
Okay.
They were pinned down by enemy fire, couldn't advance,
Mm-hmm.
and then a Navy destroyer offshore saw what was happening
Oh, wow.
and laid down a barrage of covering fire.
So they could push forward.
Exactly, allowed them to take the objective.
That's a great example of how cooperation extends beyond just your immediate team.
Right.
It's about recognizing the strengths of others and working together to achieve that common goal.
And this can go even further too, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And cooperating with local populations in a conflict zone,
It's crucial, really.
winning hearts and minds.
It can be just as important as winning the battles themselves.
So building trust, providing aid, demonstrating respect for the local customs and traditions.
All of that plays a role.
So it's a reminder that cooperation isn't just about tactics and firepower. It's about understanding the human element.
Absolutely.
And that lasting victory, it requires more than just military strength.
And this brings us back to that core message of MCDP 1 to 3.
Okay.
Cooperation, it's the key to success in this complex world of modern warfare.
It's grounded in self-discipline,
Right.
guided by a deep understanding of the mission.
Exactly.
So it's not just a concept, it's a way of life for a Marine.
It really is.
As you continue your service, remember these principles we've talked about today. Strive to embody them in your actions.
Be that leader that MCDP 1 to 3 envisions.
Because ultimately, it's those bonds between Marines, their ability to work together to adapt, that makes them such a formidable force.
Couldn't have said it better myself.